You are listening to the International Radio Report. Your reactions are much appreciated. Feel free to send them to radioreport@yahoo.com. That is radioreport@yahoo.com. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, April the 9th, 2023. You're listening to CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon. Jill is with me as usual, and we thank you for tuning in for our show again today. We have 30 minutes of news and information from all parts of the world talking about radio. You can reach us, email radioreport@yahoo.com. Our show is live streaming and archived through the ckut.ca website. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, we have 909 members. You can join the group anytime you like and get links to the stories that we talk about on the show, plus other stories that don't make it to the broadcast that are posted there either by us or by other members of the group. We are on YouTube. If you want to go check out the show on YouTube at your leisure, you can do so. youtube.com/@IRR, and you could subscribe to the channel there as well. Lots of old shows there that you can go back and listen to as well. We have 813 subscribers there. And as we mentioned last week, we are now also on the Internet Archive. You can find the International Radio Report shows posted up there as well. We're hoping to be able to add more of them going back to some of the older shows as we find them and get them digitized and get them up onto the site. So lots of different ways to track us down. So we'll start off with some information. The CKUT funding drive, which we've been talking about for weeks, is officially over, and CKUT is very pleased to say that the goal that they had set of $45,000 has been reached, and everyone's very happy about that. There's going to be parties going on in Montreal to celebrate, and so it's secured funding again for another year here at CKUT. So we thank everybody who contributed to the funding drive, in particular to those who tagged their donations to our show. We really do appreciate that. So if you didn't and you want to still support, you can always do that anytime at all. Go to ckut.ca. There's a donate button up in the top corner. Just click on that and you can follow the instructions and make a pledge to support campus community radio here at CKUT in Montreal. Now, we've had a rather interesting few days here in Montreal and in the province of Quebec with a substantial freezing rain and ice storm that hit us. We've seen this before in Montreal, and we've seen it again now. I was pretty lucky. We were in an area just to the east of Montreal where we didn't lose our power at all, but over 1 million hydro subscribers throughout the province of Quebec without power, for some still out of power as we're recording here today. And Jill, you can tell us about firsthand experiences. You are in the city of Montreal. You tied power outages to radio listening, which is always interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was not even thinking that it would have been possible to record the show today, but I'm the lucky one that power came back after only 26 hours without power. Of course, the rain started, and one of the first things I did before the power outage, actually, I already had the idea that as the ice was accumulating on the trees and on the power lines, to take out my good old scanner radio and see what's around. There's a lot of stuff that's now encrypted, so we can't listen to the local police, for example. But we can hear Sûreté du Québec. We can hear all sorts of utility companies that still use analog. It's even interesting to listen to like delivery companies that still use also these types of communications, because they're on the road. They're on the first hand of, hey, things are getting out of control here. And so you started hearing reports of ice and tree branches and trees falling down. So there was that, and I let my scanner radio go through different frequencies. Lots of interesting communications there that were to listen to and to kind of assess on the ground what's happening and all the companies affected by it too. So it's not just, listening to the police when you're on scanner radio. There's a lot more than that. Listening to amateur radio operators on 2-meter band also, seeing what they have to say on what's happening. Then, of course, power out equals, I'm going to check the noise level. But at first, I had no power on the street here, but the neighbors on the other street had power, and the corner street had power. My noise floor was still very high, so it was not, anything interesting to listen to. It's when everything went really, really dark, which was around, I guess, 10 p.m. There was a big blue flash outside. And then I saw that everything around got dark. So it's like, oops, okay, now I think I'm going to try it again. And the noise was zero. I mean, it was like listening in the 1980s. Of course, tuned around a lot on my Texan portable receivers, listening to a lot of signals. I mean, I could listen to the BBC 12095 around 11 p.m. just with the telescopic antenna in my living room. Crystal clear for their signal coming from Madagascar Relay on the different bands. So the band scan, lots of interesting stuff to go through. It's almost like there's too much because you're going to have just a few hours to listen. So you're kind of trying to get all the different signals going a little faster, not really stopping on any signal for more than a certain amount of time because you want to see what else is out there. Then the power came back, at least at the corner street first, and then my noise came back. So that was also an interesting experiment in the noise around us. Where does the noise come from when we listen to the radio? Also, one interesting thing we talk about all the time is how, in emergency situations, having a radio is important. I did listen to the local stations. I listened to the CBC French, 98.5 also, to see what they had to say, because now they were kind of in a emergency mode where they had special programming that they kicked in for what was happening, because I wanted to know what was happening, especially because my smartphones and computers have so much time on battery. So at some point you're running out of batteries and you have to find other ways of getting and even the internet connectivity was not good on the smartphone. Too many people probably trying to access at the same time. The internet went really slow at some point. In La Presse this morning, I was reading an article where, we're still today as we're recording, it's like something like 600,000 subscribers still without power. And actually, I'm lucky because around me, almost everybody has no power. And so I don't know what magic is happening that I have power. But in La Presse, they were talking to people in the affected area, including Rosemont, which is next to where I live. It's one of the places that's the most affected in Montreal. And one of the person that they talked to said, well, we had to dig out our portable radios. So it shows you that having a radio is extremely important, even when things look right, and you live in a big city, you're kind of in a mode where nothing bad can happen. Well, yeah, something bad can happen, and it happened very quickly too. We went from it started raining at 10 a.m. and everybody had no power at midnight. It was a very quick succession of tree branches, and even here the trees on the street. A lot of the branches fell in the street.
Yeah, we found, as I said, we didn't have power outage where I live, but there was a fair amount of damage, tree branches down, that sort of thing. Fortunately, it didn't take out any wiring or what have you. But it came up pretty quick. There were a lot of warning that was coming, but if you're not ready for it and suddenly everything goes dark. Regarding the lack of interference and noise level, I think what it really shows is that once you can get away and out into a quiet area, there's all sorts of things out there to listen to. So it's not that there isn't anything on the radio. It's their signals, but you just can't get to them. Yep. And if you can find a way to eliminate that noise, whether it's tracing where it's coming from and being able to eliminate it, or just getting away from it and going off to another location where you're not experiencing that, you're going to find that there's a lot more signals out there than you might think there are. So, it takes a difficult experience like this and losing power to realize, the power of your radio, of your portable radio, being able to get information to you through something that you may have forgotten about. Maybe a lot of people have forgotten about radio. Who needs that? Well, perfect example of you certainly do need it.
Definitely.
Anyways, we move on to some other stories. A story about a Vancouver, British Columbia DJ who passed away at the age of 86. I had not heard of this person before, but seems he was a pretty big deal. His name was Red Robinson, a Vancouver DJ who interviewed the Beatles and other rock and roll giants. Passes away at 86. And CBC, our national network, covered this story, so it gives you an indication of how special this person was. Longtime broadcaster, show promoter, and advocate for rock and roll in Vancouver, Red Robinson died according to his family. In a statement posted online, Robinson's family say he passed away after a brief illness on Saturday, 2 days after his 86th birthday. Robinson began his radio career in 1954 at Vancouver's CJOR after making a prank call to the station, pretending to be the actor Jimmy Stewart, who was in town for at the time filming a movie. The BC Entertainment Hall of Fame credits him as the first DJ in Canada to play rock and roll music on a regular basis. Robinson was inducted into the Canadian Broadcast Hall of Fame in 1997 and the Rockabilly Hall of Fame in 2000, retiring from radio in 2007. His website says Robinson jumped to Vancouver CKWX station in 1957, where he met American singer Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley. He went on to interview the Beatles and even called Johnny Cash a friend. He received the Order of British Columbia in 2016 and was also the recipient of the Canada 125 Award and the Queen Elizabeth II Golden Jubilee Medal. The city of Vancouver declared March 30th, 2017, Red Robinson Day in honor of his 80th birthday to recognize his work in bringing some of the biggest acts of the 50s and 60s to Vancouver. So a pretty special guy. Us being in the eastern part of Canada wouldn't have necessarily been exposed to this DJ out in British Columbia on the West Coast, but certainly an impressive resume of what he did in radio in Western Canada.
There's a lot of these pretty important people in radio fields that are unknown to many of us, but probably big stars in their area where they actually were on the radio for so long. So it seems that this was one of those big names and much more localized area in British Columbia. So in our next story, the National Association of Broadcasters launches campaign for AM radio. This is by Paul McLean, Radio World. With the long-term survival of the U.S. AM broadcast ban in question, the National Association of Broadcasters has launched a campaign to highlight AM's importance in cars. Emphasizing the ban's role for news, community engagement, entertainment, and vital public safety information, the association launched Depend on AM Radio. The campaign includes a website with a grassroots call to action and new tools for stations to highlight the importance of AM radio. It encourages site visitors to contact their members of Congress about the issue. The webpage highlights 7 things you may not know about AM radio. The site includes an infographic about AM and its benefits. NAB is urging all radio stations to participate in reminding listeners what makes AM radio unique. Noting that some car makers are dropping AM radio for some car models, NAB said it wants to share the dire implications of this decision. Among the public officials who have recently voiced concern about the removal of AM in cars are former FEMA administrators, FCC Commissioner Nathan Symington, Senator Ed Markey, and Representative Josh Gottheimer. NAB President CEO Curtis Legeit said carmakers are implementing cost-cutting measures at the expense of our nation's emergency communications abilities. So, I hope that this campaign can actually serve in educating the population about the importance of AM radio. We just talked about how radio already is important in a situation like what happened in Montreal. So imagine every emergency situation. There's a lot of things that can happen in the U.S., especially tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes. So let's hope that the message goes through.
It's good to see that there's sort of a momentum in this attempt to really explain what AM is all about and why it's important. Certainly, it was the car manufacturers, particularly the electric cars, that were the ones that sort of sparked all of this, saying, we're not even going to bother putting AM in the radios inside these cars. So we're seeing more and more stories about this coming out almost every week now. We're having a story related to this. So hopefully it'll make some progress and make some people stop and think how important this service is.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, this week it's been a little quieter. We did have some geomagnetic unrest at times, but not as previous weeks. Rather quiet conditions, and solar activity has been going down a little bit. The sun is taking a pause from its higher solar activity, but don't fear. Was again a mention that the month of March was one of the highest in solar activity in the last 10 years, so we are still continuing towards solar maximum in 2024-2025. So there's a couple of sunspot groups, but there is one to check. Sunspot group 3272 is capable of M-class solar flares, so activity could pick up quite fast when something happens on the sun. Sunspot number is 33, the solar flux 137, and there's no real coronal holes or anything that should be a problem for the week, so maybe a little quieter conditions. Do listen to the radio because there's a lot of things to listen to. Propagation has been good. And as we're going slowly towards summer, it's interesting to see the change and the shifting of what we can hear, the signals we hear. And it's a lot of fun to tune the bands, but there's only one thing that you need to do, and it's to actually turn on a radio and listen.
Hey there, I'm Paul Kaltenbach, live in Hell's Kitchen, New York City, and you're tuned to International Radio Report, 30 minutes of news about radio on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Our next story comes also from Paul McLean in Radio World, and some pirate radio news. Pirate signals in Oregon and Puerto Rico prompt FCC letters. We have two more FCC landlord letters to tell you about. The Commission is continuing its effort to pressure pirate radio operators by sending letters to owners of property where the agencies detected illegal signals. In Salem, Oregon, the East Side Free Methodist Church got a letter about an FM signal on 90.5 megahertz. The FCC said it traced the signal to a property that the church owns in the city of Portland. And in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Osvaldo Carlos Forbes Mussel got a letter about an FM signal on 90.1 FM emanating from a property that he owns. In both cases, the Commission advised the property owners that they would face significant penalties if they were found to allow anyone to engage in pirate radio on their property. The current maximum penalty is around $2.3 million. The FCC Enforcement Bureau issued 21 notices to property owners and managers in 2022. The Commission in January also published a pirate enforcement database as required by Congress, listing enforcement actions since January of 2020. However, it appears that the public list will only be updated periodically, and the most recently announced efforts do not yet appear. I took a look at that database. It is really quite interesting. We'll put a link up to it. I think you'll find it some interesting reading to see how organized this effort is to try to finally do something about shutting down these predominantly FM pirate stations operating throughout the United States.
One thing for sure is that they do look like they're really serious at actually fixing the pirate problems because, for a long time we heard about pirates and we had kind of a calm down in the fines and everything, but now it's like, no, we're serious and we are going to do everything that it takes. Also on that website where the database is, we have, I believe, a map that you can also look at, which is kind of a very educational map of where things are happening in terms of pirate radio also. So in our next story, I've seen a lot of posts of sad people out there with this story. RTE Radio 1 names the day to turn off 252 longwave. This is via RTE and the shortwave listening post. RTE Radio 1 will cease broadcasting on longwave 252 from Friday, April 14th, 2023. The station continues to broadcast on FM, on Saorview and Saorsat, along with RTE Radio Player and Irish Radio Player apps. In the UK, Radio 1 will still be available on Freesat, Sky, and Virgin Media, along with online streaming services such as smart speakers. The phasing out and closure of the long-wave service was one of the recommendations of the Future of Media Commission report, which was published by the government in July 2022. This was part of a wider recommendation aimed at ensuring RTE could invest available resources in innovation and digital services. Further investment into the mast and transmitter, which is no longer fit for purpose and has a significant carbon emission footprint, would significantly impair RTE's ability to meet the emissions reductions target required to contribute to the National Climate Action Plan. 252 longwave has been in use for many decades, including for a time broadcasting Atlantic 252 from 1988 till 2002. It was then used for Team Talk 252, which lasted just a few months. It has been broadcasting Radio 1 since 2004. The closure of the frequency has been announced before, but was met with objections from listeners. RTE says its decision to take the long-wave service off air is based on three interrelated factors. Like all businesses, RTE is seeking to reduce its energy usage in response to the climate crisis, public expenditure efficiency, and to reduce the burden on the national grid, and long-wave consumes significant energy. The requirement to invest to maintain the mast is very significant, and given the greatly reduced number of listeners and the inaccessibility of long-wave radio on newer devices means that this is a cost which is unfortunately no longer sustainable. The increased accessibility of RTE services and content internationally in a range of other formats which are reaching a wide audience. RTE Director General D. Forbes said, "While RTE has invested considerably in prolonging the life of the transmitter to broadcast RTE Radio 1 on longwave 252, we can no longer justify this investment. Not only is RTE Radio 1 widely available in the UK across television and online services, including apps and smart speakers, the energy costs involved, along with the cost of replacing the transmitter, mean that in line with the recommendations of the Future of Media Commission report, the time has come to bring the long-wave service to a close. While this may be disappointing to some listeners, RTE must continue to invest in critical projects underpinning our production, distribution, and business activities, as well as digital projects which are essential to ensure we continue to deliver value to our audiences." RTE is supporting this announcement with an information campaign on RTE Radio 1 longwave through ads in relevant UK titles, via posters and flyers which will be distributed to a number of community organizations via the Irish Embassy in London and the Irish consulates in Britain and across RTE's social media channels. So once again, I'm shutting down what cost the most. Often medium wave and long wave is the first hit. And going into a digital future. But that signal went really far, and a lot of people that are out of reach of access still had something to listen to that now will be gone.
It's a shame to see services like this disappear. Even if it was used as a backup service, would be something to have on standby. You know, we talked about that with the shutdown of hydropower here in Quebec due to an ice storm. When you lose access to some of these new services, it would be nice to have the old standbys ready to kick into action again when needed. Longwave in particular, very expensive. Takes big antennas, powerful transmitters, eats up a lot of power, but it does have the range. And that's the one thing that's missing with some of these other services. Speaking of shutdowns, the Taliban is at it again. This comes from the India Blooms news service via Radio World. Taliban shuts down women-run radio station. The Taliban administrators of Afghanistan have shut down the women's-run Radio Sadi-e-Banawan in northeastern Badakhshan province over an alleged violation of the ruling regime's broadcasting policy, media reports said. According to the Taliban's director of information and culture in Badakhshan province, Mozuddin Ahmadi, the women-run radio station was forced to cease its operation due to broadcasting music during the holy month of Ramadan, reports the Kama Press. Taliban's director of information and culture and the official of the Department of Vice and Virtue of the province on Thursday shut down the radio station and locked its doors, according to the news agency. Naila Shirzad, director of the radio station, however, denied broadcasting music and violating the Taliban's policy. Shirzad relates the group's decision of shutting down the radio in response to the programs about girls' education that her radio had aired recently, the Afghan news agency reported. Over the past several months, women continued to run the radio station despite challenges being faced by them.
We've talked about it in the past in different other stations. It's using an excuse, finding that little problem that they don't like to shut down.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the do's and don'ts of Ramadan, but playing music, I don't know. Maybe you're allowed to play music, but anyways, as you say, find a reason to shut it down, and that's what they've done. So hopefully these women that have, I guess, taken a risk and put this station on the air in the first place will find a way to keep it going. But I think we'll see more and more of, the Taliban clamping down on things that they said they weren't going to do. But we're seeing more and more of things happening that I think a lot of people anticipated would be happening.
Yeah, unfortunately. So we have upcoming ham radio contests.
It is a busy weekend coming up. We have a number of international ham radio events taking place. First off is the Holy Land DX contest that is organized by the Israel Amateur Radio Club. It's from 2100 Zulu April 14th to 2100 Zulu April 15th, SSB, CW, and digital, and it's 1.8 through 28 megahertz.
We have the Worked All Provinces of China DX contest, 0600 Zulu April 15th to 0559 Zulu April 16th, organized by the Mulan DX Club. Mode is SSB. Bands 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters.
The YU DX contest, organized by the Amateur Radio Union of Serbia, will be operating from 0700 April 15th to 0659 Zulu April 16th. That is an SSB and CW event, 80 through 10 meters.
The CQMMDX contest, 09 Zulu April 15 to 2359 Zulu April 16, organized by the Duis de Fora CW group. CW mode, it's 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters.
And a couple QSO parties going on. Michigan's QSO party, 1600 Zulu April 15th to 0400 Zulu April 16th, organized by the Mad River Radio Club, CW and SSB, 80 meters through 10 meters.
The Ontario QSO party, 1800 Zulu April 15th to 05 Zulu April 16th, and 12 Zulu to 18 Zulu April 16th, organized by the Contest Club of Ontario. Modes are SSB, CW, and FM. The bands from 160 to 2 meters, with the exception of the work bands.
All right. Lots of activity on the ham bands coming up next weekend. If you're into that sort of thing, lots of different events you can participate in. And as a shortwave listener as well, if you want to just tune around and eavesdrop on what's going on. So that will do it for us today. We do thank you for tuning in. We'll be back again next Sunday with our next edition. In the meantime, happy Easter, Happy Ramadan, happy Passover, and everything going on at the same time. plus whatever other event or celebration you might be participating in. Have a good one.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you again next week with our next edition of the International Radio Report here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.